Lawyers provide rationale for special counsel investigation into former Trump campaign manager Mark Wilson. Getty Images. Special counsel Robert Mueller was interested in whether Paul Manafort provided the Trump campaign a back channel to Russia, a Justice Department lawyer has said. Justice Department Attorney Michael Dreeben made the omission in a hearing where Mr. Manafort's attorneys were trying to have the charges against the former Trump campaign manager dropped. Mr. Manafort's attorneys claim Mr. Mueller stepped outside the scope of his investigation when he brought money laundering and conspiracy charges against Mr. Manafort. The charges were related to political consulting work Mr. Manafort did in Ukraine for more than a decade. Mr. Mueller's defense team argued that investigating Mr. Manafort's business dealings in Ukraine was well within the scope of the investigation, because of Mr. Manafort's influential role in the Trump campaign. Mr. Dreeben said the special counsel may have wanted to investigate the former campaign manager's connections to foreign leaders, and whether they could have provided a back channel. Here you have somebody who was a campaign official in the Trump campaign, where he had long-standing ties to Russia-backed politicians in the Ukraine, Mr. Dreeben said of Mr. Manafort, according to the Associated Press. He added, "What was the nature of those connections? Did they provide a means for surreptitious communications? Did they provide a back channel to Russia?" Mr. Manafort worked with Ukraine President Viktor Yanukovych and Russian aluminium magnate Oleg Deripaska, among others, before joining the Trump campaign. He was indicted on 12 charges of money laundering and conspiracy in October, the first charges to come from the special counsel's investigation of possible Trump campaign ties to Russia. Mr. Manafort pleaded not guilty. Donald Trump asked about Mueller probe after signing order imposing $60 billion in tariffs on Chinese imports. Lawyers for the former campaign chairman claim Mr. Mueller was given blank check by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who they say wrote an overly broad authorization order for the entire special counsel probe. His lawyers were especially concerned by a recently released memo written in August, which shows that the Deputy Attorney General personally authorized Mr. Mueller to investigate whether Mr. Manafort committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials. Mr. Manafort's attorneys claimed the Deputy Attorney General failed to put the rationale for investigating Mr. Manafort into writing at the time Mr. Mueller was appointed. The memo, they say, was written after the fact, in order to justify the investigation. Mr. Dreeben responded by saying the memo was a confirmation of what prosecutors were thinking about Mr. Manafort when Mr. Mueller was appointed, according to Bloomberg News. "It's not a blank check," he said. "It's not carte blanche." Mr. Manafort is scheduled for a criminal trial date in July in Virginia, and another in September in Washington. More about Paul Manafort Russia investigation. Robert Mueller. We use content. We use cookies to enhance your visit to our site and to bring you advertisements that might interest you. Read our privacy and cookie policies to find out more.